Good evening. It's Diane Sayre here, and welcome to the New York Symposium. Today is Friday, September 16th, and the topic today should be the coming fall of the House of Windsor, a special report commissioned by LaRouche and published by Executive Intelligence Review. Oh, goodness, nearly 30 years ago. It's very relevant, and I have two guests who share my enthusiasm for the defeat of the British Empire at long last, and I'll be introducing them shortly, but I wanted to tell you in part what was my motivation for having a discussion on the topic of the British Empire and the late Queen of England, who's I guess, I don't know if she's been buried or they're still doing all kinds of ceremonies, but we'd like to bury her memory and her legacy. So I'm going to show you an article which appeared, here it is, in the Sahara Reporters. And no, this is not my website. This is an article in what I believe is a newspaper or online publication. I thought maybe from Nigeria, although that's not necessarily the Sahara. At any rate, it says, as you can see, U.S. senatorial candidate Diane Sayre questions honoring Queen Elizabeth II, calls late monarch genocide advocate. And there's my website. And they say, however, Sayre has taken exception to the flying of flags at half-mast in the U.S. to honor her, describing the late monarch as an advocate of genocide. Diane Sayre, an independent candidate for New York State and the U.S. Senate in the November 8th, 2022 election, has questioned the American government for flying flags at half-mast to honor the late Queen of England. Then they have my Twitter feed. She said on her official Twitter handle Friday, "Why are we Americans who had a revolution against the British Empire flying flags at half-mast in memory of one of the great genocidalists of all time?" And then they talk about a professor who got in some trouble, and Jeff Bezos gets in on it, defending the Queen, of course. Not surprisingly, this tweet that I put out actually generated tens of thousands of what they call engagements. It was close to 600,000 impressions. It was one of the most controversial things I've said, and I'm sorry to have realized that there is, I guess we should know it with this Hollywood set, there's so much love for the British monarchy. You would think people might remember something about the American Revolution and realize there's the reason why we don't have a monarch in this republic of ours. And also people should know that there still is no written constitution in Great Britain to this day. Now, I wanted to also show you an article, well, something that was published by Executive Intelligence Review, because I got into a debate on Facebook with someone in Staten Island about the monarchy, he wrote to me saying, "Well, now you don't sound like an independent or conservative, you really sound like LaRouche." And I wrote back, "Is that because I'm right?" And that he found quite offensive, but he didn't realize that the Queen actually owned all of these mining corporations with their own mercenary armies who were committing genocide and atrocities in Africa, not to mention, of course, the eugenics and other racialist. I mean, the whole thing about the monarchy, you realize that the reason the Habsburgs all started looking funny is because everyone had to intermarry, because you could only marry people with the right bloodline. So if you want to know where Hitler got some of his ideas from, you can look to this. But here, let me show you what we published some years ago, because it's highly relevant. This is from a report commissioned by Lyndon LaRouche on the coming fall of the House of Windsor. And I think most notably is that Prince Philip, the Queen's royal consort, actually created the World Wildlife Foundation. And that foundation was used. Here's the list of some of the who's who. Through the Club of the Isles, the Windsor dynasty functions as primus inter pares for an extended royal family that claims the thrones of Russia, Prussia, Denmark, Sweden, Belgium, Greece, the Netherlands, Yugoslavia, and scores of smaller principalities. Prince Philip of Greece and Denmark, Baron Greenwich, Earl of Merioneth, Duke of Edinburgh, royal consort to Queen Elizabeth II. How'd you like to have all those titles? Founded the World Wildlife Fund in 1961 and became its international president in 1981. I think Ben Bernanke ended up, I don't know if he's the head of it or just joined it. What is this World Wildlife Fund? It's not about all the good things that human beings do to protect the environment and improve it, but it actually created game parks. And we published in this report maps of African countries where you can see these game preserves right on the borders, which is where they would train mercenaries or terror groups to provoke civil war in areas where you wanted to exterminate a large number of people so that the royal family and their companies could come in and take the raw materials. And I used to have a dear friend or a good friend of LaRouche, I'll just stop sharing for a minute, named Godfrey Banaisa, the former president of Uganda, who said that the British just want to keep enough Africans alive to shine their shoes and run the safari tours, but otherwise they wanted them exterminated. The British Empire has a bit of a quandary now because of what China is doing and the Belt and Road Initiative, because the continent of Africa now already has well over 1 billion people, and it's going to have over 2 or 2.5 billion by 2050. And these people are not willing to shine the shoes of the colonialists, but want to get out of poverty and want to have their own sovereign development. And they're moving along, frankly, very rapidly, much more rapidly than Americans might know. And I just want to show you something else for those who say that the Queen is just a figurehead, which is a map of the nations where she is sovereign. That is, she is officially the head of state. I think a couple of these have changed, but so here's the Commonwealth, the British Commonwealth. And you see these little asterisks here, countries where Queen Elizabeth is sovereign. That is, there's a reason why the Queen's face is on the money in Canada, because she is sovereign. She has a governor general in Canada who can veto, it's not typically done, but can veto things that happen in the Parliament. She is sovereign of the so-called British Isles of Great Britain. She is sovereign of the Solomon Islands, Mauritius, Jamaica, Australia, etc. This is not just a figurehead post. When Prince Philip, her royal consort, said that he wanted to be reincarnated as a deadly virus to do something about overpopulation, that's not an idle threat. That's a guy with billions of dollars heading up all kinds of international organizations who has the power to do this. And what happened when I put out that tweet, and fawning Americans and Brits were very upset that I would call the Queen a genocidalist, tens of thousands of people from all over Africa responded, particularly regarding the Biafra wars, where I guess in 70 or so, 3.5 million or more people were killed. Someone put in a tweet from Kenya saying, yeah, I don't know why we're honoring her in Kenya. We still have unexploded ordnance from a British colonial occupation here in our country. This really provoked quite a stir. So, and now finally, what I just want to say is, if you look at what we are seeing right now in this Ukraine situation, because this is part of the same thing, you would think that after World War II, people would say, and they said never again, but what were they saying never again to? just mass genocide in general? Clearly not, because there's been a lot of genocide since then. Is it only a Nazi crime if it's a specific group of people that are targeted led by a guy named Adolf Hitler? Or is there a fascist ideology that declares any group of people less than human and therefore with the right to exterminate them? And what we are supporting in Ukraine, what was put into power by the coup funded by the National Endowment for Democracy under the Obama-Biden administration, with significant input from the MI6. Christopher Steele was writing dossier upon dossier to Victoria Nuland, probably telling her who to put in government there. We have put in a regime that is reviving the legacy of the Nazis, of particularly the figure Stepan Bandera, under whose reign hundreds of thousands of Jews, Poles, Russians were killed very brutally. And this is now coming out in the open, where a famous Nazi hunter named Arnold Klarsfeld has written an article in a French journal called Le Point, or The Point, which is a weekly, and he writes, quote, "If the Ukrainians want to be part of the European Union family, they must stop glorifying Ukrainian nationalists who were presented as heroes and who collaborated with the Nazis and assisted them in the extermination of tens of thousands of Jewish families in Ukraine. One of the first actions of the Kiev municipality after the 2014 revolution was to rename the long avenue leading to the site of the Babi Yar massacre from Moscow Avenue to Bandera Avenue, whose followers assisted the Nazis in the extermination of more than 30,000 Jewish men, women, and children in the Babi Yar ravine on September 29 through 30, 1941. And he concludes his article saying, Europe and the European Union were built on the victory over Nazism. It must remember this. So when we talk about lists, blacklists, such as the one that I am on, and others, Tulsi Gabbard, Rand Paul, most importantly, Helga Zeppler-Roush, and 31 speakers at Schiller Institute conferences, as being accused not only of Russian propagandists, but as the leader of the Center for Countering Disinformation said, we are information terrorists guilty of war crimes. And that list has been in part transferred to another list, which is truly a kill list, the Mirotvoret's so-called peacemakers in true Orwellian form, on which over a dozen or more journalists have already been blown up with car bombs and other kinds of assassinations, members of parliament who have been killed, things like that. This is very serious, and the US Congress shouldn't be funding it. And I think the relationship between the British royals, the fawning over the Queen, the willingness to whitewash a legacy of genocide and eugenics, and then the fact that we seem to be incapable of recognizing that we are supporting Nazi atrocities right now in the United States are of a piece, and this has to be changed. So with that, let me just introduce both of our speakers. We're going to hear from Cynthia Rush first, who is from the Ibero-American Desk of Executive Intelligence Review, who lived in Argentina for some years, and she'll be followed by Chris Fogarty, who's a retired civil engineer, knows something about the British Empire from his own Irish connections, and who has been active in the cause of peace for some time. So we'll go first to Cynthia Rush.
Hi. I actually wanted to start by saying that if there's any country in the world that understands the nature of the British Empire, it's Argentina. You can be sure that they have not flown their flags at half-staff like the United States. For Argentina, the British Empire is its historic enemy. And around the issue of the recent passing of the Queen, you might imagine that there was a lot of commentary. I had a quote here from a message that I received from a contact, if Jose can put that up, which simply demonstrates the reality of how people understand the evil nature of this empire. I'll just go ahead. This is a message that was circulated very widely, and there were hundreds and hundreds of them, noting that given that on the death of the Queen of England, it starts out somewhat facetiously, but and the sorrow overwhelmingly transmitted by the media, and in accordance with my own profound humanist conviction, today I want to, more than ever, pay emotional and deeply felt homage to my Argentine compatriots of the General Belgrano battleship, killed in such a cowardly manner by that country, England, under the supreme authority of she who died today, who celebrated that war crime without shame or remorse before the world's media. This was referring to during the Malvinas War, which went from April 2nd to June 14th of 1982, where the British torpedoed this battleship, which was moving away from the zone of conflict back toward the mainland. In other words, it wasn't in the area of conflict, just torpedoed it, killed 300 sailors. And this is considered a war crime and is a matter of tremendous, still today, tremendous anger. This person goes on to pay homage to those who were killed in the Malvinas War. And just to say something about this war, the Argentines retook the Malvinas, which were stolen from it in 1833 by the British Empire. This was the islands on which the Argentines had established their provincial government, had their authorities set up, their institutions set up, and the British simply moved in and kicked them out and sent them back to Buenos Aires. And at the time, who was the US president? Andrew Jackson. Despite the fact that the Monroe Doctrine had been promulgated 10 years earlier, as conceived by John Quincy Adams, specifically as a defense of the Americas against British imperialism, against the British Empire specifically. So that was ignored. And this is an issue that is today one of, it's an emotional issue, but it's also an issue of state, because this is a piece of Argentine territory, national territory, in the same way that Taiwan is part of China's national territory. It's an issue of sovereignty, and it has, for decades. And as I said earlier, the Argentines understand the British question going back to the period of independence, which really, that's the case of all of Iberoamerica, because the British were all over the place in that period, trying to make sure there would not be any emulation of the American Revolution in Iberoamerica. So this is an issue of national sovereignty. If you look at them, I have some maps, which I don't know if Jose can put those up. Yeah, well, that's just Argentina, where it's located in the tip of South America. This is Argentina. You can see what the British call the Falkland Islands, which are to the right side there. The Malvinas, and you also had the South Georgia and South Sandwich Islands, which belong to, part of that region which the Argentines claim as part of their sovereign territory. And at the very, very bottom, you can see the Tierra del Fuego, which is the southernmost province, but the name of that was changed some time ago to be Tierra del Fuego, the South Atlantic Islands, meaning all those, and the Antarctic, because they claim but a portion of the Antarctic, which many other countries have areas of the Antarctic they also claim. So just to give you an idea of that. But this war took place, as Lyndon LaRouche said at the time, the Argentines were sandbagged. The military dictatorship, which existed at that time, took this action on April 2nd of '82. They were basically, it was made known to them through various channels, including the US State Department, that if Argentina took this action, nothing would happen, that the US would not respond. And as we saw, that was not the case. Margaret Thatcher sent her task force of 127 ships, traveled 4,300 miles to punish Argentina for daring to take such an action. And the US, recall Al Haig was Secretary of State, I believe, played a really dirty game. Reagan unfortunately caved in completely against his initial inclinations to, not to go with the British. And the point that that we made at the time, and Dennis Small, our Ibero-America director of our Ibero-America section, was in Argentina during that war, and he noted the unbelievable ferment because people hated the dictatorship, but this was an issue of just incredible strategic importance for the country. And people might remember it. All of Ibero-America rallied. There was incredible ferment. Came to Argentina's defense, with the exception of Chile under the dictator Pinochet, and Colombia for their own internal reasons. And it was this situation. Why did Thatcher send her task force 4,300 miles? Was it just to retake a fairly desolate group of islands? No. And I should add that today the Malvinas Islands basically have become a NATO outpost. It's armed to the teeth. But basically here you had a country of South America being so uppity as to take action against the United Kingdom. But this was not just to punish them for taking this group of islands back, but to really send a message, that NATO will come and enforce not only this particular action, but you had an incredible debt situation. Almost all of the nations of Ibero-America had hundreds of billions of dollars in non-performing debt. Lyndon LaRouche and our organization was deeply involved in this whole situation, intervened directly. LaRouche's voice was heard in Argentina, and LaRouche made the specific recommendation. What nations need to do is these nations drop the debt bomb, because the City of London and through NATO cannot be allowed to enforce their, defend their crumbling empire, financial empire, and debt collection policies. And that was LaRouche. If you can put up the picture of the Operation Juarez, which LaRouche wrote in 1982 at the request of the Mexican president Lopez Portillo, which was, among other things, his proposal for not only dropping the debt bomb, but an entire development program for not only Ibero-America, but in a certain way also for the United States, and how the United States could reestablish a positive relationship with the nations of the Americas in a mutually beneficial relationship for economic development. So this was an extraordinarily important document. What you had then after the war was, the policy was to crush Argentina, and anybody else that might have had any idea of following LaRouche's proposals, recommendations, to humiliate it, to demalvinize it, which is the term that was used. In other words, that political ferment that existed of defensive sovereignty could not be allowed to exist. It was a very brutal operation, actually, that followed that. And a, horrendous response from the rest of the world, except for Ireland, what the predecessor to the European Union, the European Commission, which, put a ban on all military exports to Argentina, demanded immediate withdrawal, banned imports from Argentina. It was really disgusting. So this is just an example. I had put up the picture of Juan Perón, who was president from 1946 to 55, when he was overthrown in a British orchestrated coup. And then briefly again in 73 and 74, he was president. He understood the British question really, really well. And there's a saying among the Peronist movement and, activists in a rally when they get together for rallies. And the saying is, anybody who doesn't jump up and down is a Brit. And his understanding of the British Empire was one of the reasons that he had to be overthrown, aside from his policies of industrialization. So we continue to have a lot of input into the Argentine situation. I don't have time now to mention the assassination attempt that was made against the Vice President, Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner, which there's an ongoing investigation. People may remember, you've seen in the media, that the would-be assassin, which was a young group of lumpen youth, but particular assassin had tattoos of the Ukrainian Azov, the Nazi battalion, Azov battalion, the Black Sun, and the swastika tattooed on his arm. And this obviously immediately raises the question of what international connections may have been involved here. There's an ongoing investigation. It's very, very clear this was not an isolated lone wolf attack. It was planned in advance. There was actually planned another attempt a few days earlier than September 1st, which was when that attempt was made. And there is evidence of a money trail from higher ups in the political structure in the country, which is also being looked at. And this is not at all irrelevant in terms of our work on the exposure of the Center for Countering Disinformation, the Marotta Ferrets. Other members of the current government have been threatened. The president has been threatened. There are ongoing violent demonstrations by these different lumpenized youth groups. And it's, the subject of further investigation. So I'll stop there.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And now we'll go to Chris Fogarty, and then I think we'll have some discussion about this situation. Go ahead, Chris.
Okay.
Glad to have you here.
Yes, thank you very much. To follow up a little bit on Cynthia's words there, it's important to know that Kep Weinberger was awarded a prize by the British government for his having the ship sailed down from Britain down to the Ascension Islands with essentially no capability to perform any military work. And he provided the munitions, the cannons, everything they would need to go to war. And therefore, so that raised the question, when was it that the United States government abandoned the American system and joined with the nation that they fought to get rid of. And it was obviously before the Malvinas War. And maybe sometime around Reagan, would it be, or it's tough to know, but there was a shift. This used to be a nation with wonderful policies of goodwill toward mankind, the spreading of prosperity and well-being. And now it is joined with genocidal Britain, and it's truly a shame. If we could have some of those, let's see, the first of those graphics posted. Yes, this is up. This was placed upon Charles being made king. That's on a hill, on a mountain overlooking Belfast in Northern Ireland. That is what the people, what the Irish of Northern Ireland want. We serve no king but Ireland, and they do not want to be controlled by the British government. But shameful to say, the United States government has been operating with the British in the crimes being perpetrated against the Irish since 1969. In 1969, the Irish living in the lands of their ancestors were not allowed to vote unless they were property owners. They had been previously robbed of their property by the people who were controlling them. And so they went on rallies and protests. They demanded the right to vote. It was suppressed bloodily for 6 years. And then finally in 1973, the British government did allow the Irish to vote. Some say the Catholics, but you don't have to be a Catholic to be a Republican, obviously, to favor Republican government. So they got the vote, but then the British government responded by getting the employers of Northern Ireland, the 6 counties, the 6 occupied counties, to discriminate, to not hire Catholics. That's how they defined Republicans, those who do not want a monarchy. And we here in the States, once we learned about that, we decided we would at least require that the United States companies operating there not participate in that job denial policy. There were 25 US firms operating there, Ford Motor Company, IBM, et cetera, the big companies. There were 25 companies that are operating there, and they employed 11% of the working population of the 6 counties. So a law was devised called the MacBride Principles for Fair Employment in Northern Ireland that would require that the United States companies who on the New York Stock Exchange, in which many state funds, retirement funds, et cetera, were invested, to not participate in that job denial policy. And we got it, Illinois was the 3rd state to get it enacted into law, and later it became a federal law. It at least saved a part of the population of the Ireland's 6 counties, the occupied 6 counties, to not be denied jobs anymore because of their religion or because of their ethnicity or political thinking. So if we could get the next graphic, if you please. Yes, so maybe I'll read it because we can't have a conversation while the spectators are trying to read it. This is British King Charles III. For those of you both here and in Britain who don't know, the beret he is wearing is that of the Parachute Regiment, of which he has been a commander-in-chief for years. By the way, this is written by and for people in the occupied 6 counties. So to continue, in 1971, the Parachute Regiment marauded through Ballymurphy and shot dead 10 completely innocent civilians. It was over 40 years before the British establishment acknowledged that they were all 10 completely innocent. And then I suppose the rest of that statement. So that's the cap he's wearing, that same regiment. He's the leader of that regiment. So a few months later, the paramilitary did it again in Derry, this time shooting dead 13 completely innocent civilians and shooting and maiming another 14 innocents. Again, it took over 40 years for Britain to acknowledge what they did. In the intervening years, and by the way, all of this was going on, of course, while Elizabeth II was queen, and could have intervened, could have stopped it at any time. But on the other hand, instead of that, she actually led these crimes. So in the intervening years, King Charles' mother, Queen Elizabeth, presented those responsible for those murders with medals and made her son, the now king, their commander-in-chief. So forgive me if I don't cry for her or welcome her son back to the scene of the crime next week. We have a saying here, Chucky our law. It means our day will come. So that's that graphic. If we could have the next one, if you please. Yes, it's a pity this can't be expanded a bit. I'm sure it probably can't. But this is the map of Ireland. Oh, wow. Yes, good. Well done. Every Union Jack you see there is the location of a British regiment during the starvation of Ireland. They were in Ireland, sent into Ireland from the then empire to remove all of Ireland's abundant and varied food crops. And the name of the regiment is right beside it. For example, in the very middle of the country, you'll see the 89th and the 12th. If it just gives a number, it's a regiment of foot, an infantry regiment. If it contains the others, are the mounted ones are lancers, or there's other lancers, or there's another two names and it just escaped me now, on horseback mounted regiments. But there were a total of 67. Those 67 regiments were out of it. There were more than half of the total British Army of 126 regiments. Or dragoon is the other more common word. And by the way, to dragoon somebody is in Webster's dictionary, for example, as to force somebody by threat of death or some other means of coercion of obeying you. So to dragoon somebody, that came from the dragoons in Ireland. And those who survived the genocide and came to the States and met somewhat the same kind of conditions in America's mines and railroads, they referred to the government operatives, they were the corporate operatives, as goons, because as Irish speakers, the word dragoon, they only got part of it. They called them goons. So the word goon was moved from the Irish struggle into the American labor struggle. And the dragoons or goons were essentially the same kind of person. So then the little crosses you see around the country, they are mass graves. Every cross is a mass grave, and its location is right beside it. Because there was only so much place, and some things occurred like a mass grave, the location of a regiment might probably occurred in the same place. We gave pride of place to the mass graves, and then set the Union Jack at the nearest space alongside. So there are some 180 mass graves. Since that map was made, it turns out that that's only about 10% of what can be considered mass graves of people who were, and a mass grave would be, we calculate something around no fewer than, we'll say, 30 bodies would be a mass grave. The biggest in Cork, in the Cork city, called Carr's Hole, has, they say, some 30,000. That seems excessive, but I don't know. Close to 5.2 million people, it seems. That's an estimate of the number of people, the murder toll of that particular genocide. That was done under Queen Victoria, who we are told today is a woman of fine sensibility. But it was, and at that time, the monarch had more power even than today, so that all of these crimes, these genocides that were occurring not alone in Ireland, but all over the world under the Victorian Empire, were all all done with the approval of Queen Victoria. As further evidence of that, when, as in 1849, as those 67,000 troops neared completion of mission, their commander-in-chief, Sir Edward Blakeney, was awarded an Order of the Bath by Queen Victoria. So the perpetrator, the key perpetrator, the commander-in-chief of that Holocaust, was awarded an Order of the Bath, one of the highest things given to military people there. And I use the word Holocaust because that is the appropriate label for it. Starting on May 4th, 1846, and continuing until November 19, 1855, the Cork Examiner newspaper, it's still in existence as the Irish Examiner newspaper, reported consistently all through those years. They described events as Holocaust. So it seems to me then that there might be except the convention of precedent usage might apply here, maybe should apply. It was used first in Ireland. I don't remember that any other group ever asked the Irish for sort of permission to use the same label. It was about according to, and I remember when it happened, Professor Norman Finkelstein writes that it was 1960, in the mid 60s, before Shoah promoters decided to change the label from Shoah to Holocaust. Genocide has since then become the generic phrase for such wipeouts of populations. But that did not exist in 1845, 1850. Genocide is of post-World War II coinage by Raphael Lumpkin, who tried to educate the United States Congress about his version of what was done to the Jews by the Nazis. So, and yet we hear from people occasionally telling us, how dare we use the word Holocaust because that belongs to Jews. But anyways, I don't get involved in that. There is precedent for this. It was again reported as such, not alone by the Examiner newspaper, but by Michael Davitt and other writers of the time. It's in their books from the time I possessed the books. So that kind of genocide has gone on under the British throughout the world. And in fact, in Ireland, it has not stopped. Their claimed right to commit mass murders in Ireland continue to this day. The Dublin Monaghan bombers of the 1970s, all well known. The bombs were primed in the house of a Royal Ulster Constable Mitchell in County Armagh early in the morning, and were driven 3 cars to Dublin and 1 car to Monaghan, and murdered 33 people and wounded 300. That was done by the known perpetrators for the British government, and the Irish government have done nothing whatever about that. Later, the FBI, in order to start the Iraq wars, and 9/11 was only another impetus in order to get us into those wars. But the wars, they are part of a neocon plan. They themselves write it as full spectrum dominance, the conquest of planet Earth and space. They couldn't proceed, or decided to not proceed, without at least one additional national military. The British government were quite willing to participate in this new set of crimes, the conquest of planet Earth and space, but their army was pretty much occupied against the IRA in the occupied 6 counties. So the United States government joined with the British in an attempt to free up the British army out of Ireland and go ahead, proceed with their planned wars. So there was a bombing in County Tyrone, in Omagh, the town of Omagh, County Tyrone, on the 15th of August, 1998. It killed 29 people, or 31 people if you count the soon to be born, and injured a few hundred. And that was a real IRA bomb, but it constituted, that group had been infiltrated by an MI5 FBI team. And they were in charge, and they remained in Ireland for years. That team remained in Ireland for years until the 15th of August, 1998, upon which they departed. They didn't depart Ireland the day of the passing of the Good Friday Agreement, which surrendered the 6 counties. They stayed there in Ireland until their mission was accomplished. And that was on the 15th of August. And I don't know what else happened that day, but their mission must have been the atrocity murder of the 31 people. And it just happens that the FBI agent who led the FBI part of that was the same person who framed Richard Jewell, the Atlanta Olympics bombing murder victim of the FBI. The bomber was Eric Rudolph, and he was kept at large by FBI agent Buckley. So evidently Clint Eastwood was so incensed by the fact that the FBI could get the news media to frame someone, an innocent person, for a murder, that he made a film with Warner Brothers. The name of the film is the name of the innocent security guard who discovered the backpack bomb and warned people away from it, but two got in within the blast range and were killed. FBI agent Buckley got the news media to frame Richard Jewell, the security guard, for those murders. And Richard Jewell died without ever seeing justice. So Clint Eastwood made the film. In that film, the evil FBI agent is Pat. And of course, the name of the FBI agent who went there from Ireland and framed him was Patrick Buckley, FBI agent Patrick Buckley, the same person who burst through our doors here with a group of drawn gun fellow agents and incarcerated us in Chicago. But all of this was for the British government. And that again raised the question, when did the United States lose its way? It used to oppose genocides. It used to oppose slavery. The American system operated against those evils. When did our government abandon the American system and become an empire? Because you cannot be a republic and an empire at the same time. An empire is built upon lies. A republic is built upon the consent of the people, government of, by, and for the people. So when the United States is no longer a republic, when it became an empire, it abandoned the republic. When did it join with Britain in becoming an empire? It was sometime in the 60s, 70s. It's hard to know exactly. The struggle was going on for many years. And by the way, to support what Cynthia was saying a minute ago, here's a book that confirms her position. And it is Hitler's English Inspirers. And it makes the case quite convincingly that the German government, in their effort to conquer and control, were using the British Empire as a guide, as their sort of standard. That's what when they went so far wrong, they went down that path in emulation of the British. So back onto the map again, and then we'll move on. Could we have the map again, please? Thank you. So again, there are 67 regiments of Britain's 126 regiment army. Even though they're, for example, up around the northern area, there are no British regiments. Some went there on brief forays, but the people died because the the British constabulary were there. This army was the third force of violence against the people. They were called in only when a combination of the constabulary and the English landlords' militia regiments could not remove the food from the people. When those two forces, the armed constabulary, and they had carbines, and the landlords' militias, they were all armed. But when those two forces met too much resistance from the people, only then was the army called in. So the army was not called in frequently in the northernmost area, because the English had better control there. And there's not much activity along the west coast either. That is largely because the land is boggy and mountainous, infertile, and didn't grow much food anyways. And yet what was there was all exported away. These arrows showed the direction of the food exports, and they were all going to England. They were frequently transshipped from England to its armies across the world and to other countries, to higher markets in other countries. But that's how that ran. My people came from here, and here in Ireland, in the west, in Connaught, and in South Leinster. So that's enough of that. If we could move then onto the book cover. So all of this information is in the book, and this is my book. It's on Amazon, or a person can get copies from me directly. It contains the complete story. It is the definitive account of the Irish Holocaust. There it is, Ireland 1845-1850, the perfect Holocaust, and who kept it, quote, perfect, unquote. That's my message. And we're hoping that the effect of LaRouche can be made heard across the country, because his message is an outstanding advocacy of the American system. The American system must be put back into operation in America. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much. This really was very good. Thank you, both you and Cynthia. I would like to just raise something that both of you can answer, because I can just hear the people in my various social media accounts saying, all right, yeah, but what does that have to do with the Queen? How do we know the Queen had anything to do with Malvinas? And what does Victoria have to do with Elizabeth? And how do you think Prince Charles really knows, or King Charles really knew that those innocent people were getting killed in Ireland? So Cynthia first, and then Chris.
Well, actually, I also wanted to just comment on something that Chris said. I mean, the whole question of the American system and when did the United States abandon the American system is something we've written about exhaustively. And the British, having never forgiven us for having made a revolution, 1776, have tried ever since then to take back the United States for the Queen. So this is, take after World War II, where you had the death of Roosevelt and Churchill and Truman moving to completely destroy what Roosevelt had proposed for a post-war order. And in terms of Ibero-America, the Malvinas War was considered the U.S. betrayal there was considered by the Argentines and by the rest of Ibero-America as a terrible betrayal, because of the past history of periods of 19th century history where the United States American system advocates were in alliance with co-thinkers in Iberoamerica working together against the British. So, and you had, of course, the Roosevelt period of the Good Neighbor policy, which was anti-British, and Jack Kennedy, who was idolized in Iberoamerica as sort of one of the last representatives of a positive relationship between the United States and the Americas. So I can tell you that the issue of the Queen, as an advocate of this policy of genocide, of destruction, the message I read earlier of what this gentleman said, that the Queen was responsible for a policy of industrializing slavery in not just Iberoamerica, but among the developing sector, of genocide, uses that term. So this is a reality that is in people's minds, and that people understand this, and it's not an abstraction, which is why we see today the movement toward creating from the global south, the developing nations, an alternative system to this policy of genocide and looting. That's what I'll have to say on that.
Chris, do you really think King Charles has anything to do with this?
The very medal on the beret on the hat that Prince Charles was wearing is that of the commander-in-chief of the very regiment that murdered the people of Bloody Sunday. And the notion, and so you could say, well, what could he have done to stop it? Well, for example, he needn't have ordered it. and what could Victoria have done regarding the so-called famine? Well, she needn't have created it by sending in more than half its army to perpetrate it. So it is silly to ask the perpetrators of a genocide, what could they have done to stop it? And yet you'll see articles all across the world asking those questions, and it's hard to believe that we live in such an insane world. So that's my suggestion.
I really appreciate that, and I appreciate your characterization of it as insane, because it is truly, you look at what we're supporting in Ukraine right now, where it's publicly acknowledged that 70% of the weapons that we're sending them are being sold on the black market, the dark web. A major mainstream media, CBS, was censored from producing a documentary which admitted to that. There are videos, even Amnesty International, which didn't have the guts to take a stand on the outrageous jailing of LaRouche and his associates, is admitting that the Ukrainian military is committing horrible atrocities, and our Congress continues to arm them. And of course, my point in wanting to do this is you have something as evil as the British Empire and the royalty and what was carried out not only in their name, but on their orders, what they actually own. And not only is there no outcry, but we're having all this pomp and circumstance and flags flying at half staff, as I objected to. I was so horrified when I went to the post office on the morning of September 9th and saw the flag there at half staff. It was really enraging, I have to say. It's almost as enraging as seeing the Ukrainian flag flying over the state capitol in Albany. So I think your question is right, and I think Americans would do well to reflect upon this. When did our republic become the partner and the enforcer of the evil, genocidal, fascist policies of the British Empire?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and will we reverse it? And I think that's the question now for us.
Thank you, Diane, for your patriotism.
You're welcome. And thank you for your courage to tell the truth. And thank you, Cynthia. And I would urge everybody listening to this show, call your representatives. You can ask them this question. Since when were we the enforcers of the policy of the British Empire. We demand that all funding of military aid to Ukraine be stopped right now, and all funding of Ukrainian governmental organizations that are producing Nazi-inspired kill lists of political leaders and truth tellers. This should be investigated. It should be stopped. And I'll tell you, you better call your congressman, because given the control and censorship of the mainstream press, they're not going to get the message otherwise.
Right.
So I'd like to thank both of you very much. I look forward to this being shared and circulated all over the United States, and hopefully will inspire a lot more patriots to step forward and help us complete the American Revolution, which clearly has not yet been completed.
Well said.
Thank
Thank
you. Yeah.
Thank you.